Every year, people lose billions through investment fraud. When you're on the journey to build your wealth, you cannot afford to lose any money. Listen to this episode as I teach you how to identify scams, the tricks that fraudsters use, and how you can protect yourself. In the last few days, there has been a story in the news about how a man lost 700,000 shillings in just 6 days. This man sold some property that he had, deposited the money in a bank, then went on a drinking spree. While he was on that spree, he met a woman who invited him to her home. While staying with her, she ended up taking almost all of his money from him. In your journey to building wealth, you are definitely going to encounter investment fraud. You cannot afford to lose any of your money if you want to consistently build your wealth. You might say that this man was old, he was dumb, it could never happen to you. However, the same tricks that were used on him by that lady have been used on countless wealthy, successful, and intelligent people to steal millions from them. Listen to this episode as I teach you how to identify a scam, the tricks that are used, and how to protect yourself. There are different ways that scam artists can use to take your money from you. For this man, he was hit by the classic affinity fraud. In this situation, the fraudster usually approaches you in a social setting and then befriends you, and in the process of that suggests investments that end up being fraudulent. For this lady, she approached the man in a bar where his guard was low. She befriended him, then invited him to her home where for 6 days she was his closest friend. They actually fornicated and even prayed. That was one of the funniest things that I saw from that episode. However, at the end of it, she was able to take his money from him. The fraudsters, therefore, usually target places like church or clubs or alumni groups where they know that people have their guards down. And it might not be the same way that it happened with this man, where it happened over 6 days. There have been fraudsters who have taken up to 3 years to befriend you before they spring their trap and take your money from you. Therefore, you need to be very, very careful. Have you ever wondered why whenever you hear that someone has been scammed of money, they will say that it was a friend who introduced them to that fraudulent organization or suggested that fraudulent investment for them? An affinity fraud is a very common approach that is used by fraudsters, and therefore you need to be extremely careful whenever you are in social events. Just because someone is a friend and they're suggesting something does not mean that you won't do your due diligence on that investment. Even the way that the woman used to ask for money from this man was a carefully thought out technique. It wasn't haphazard. She used a tactic called foot in the door. And the way this thing works is that when you are asked to do something small and you agree to do it, you are more likely to do something greater when you're asked in future. So rather than asking for this man for the 700,000 all at once, she asked for it in bits. She first of all helped him create a business plan, and she suggested that he invests 250,000. Then added another 100,000 for emergencies. The following day, she asked for 100,000 for a license and 50,000 for her own use. Finally, when the amount in the account was just low enough to be withdrawn using an ATM, she used his ATM to clear his account and left him with just 8 shillings. So a scam artist is not going to ask you for tens of millions all at once. They're going to find an amount that you are comfortable with, and then after you have agreed to that first request, there are going to be several others, and before you know it, you have lost a great amount of money. Another subtle technique that this woman used is called reciprocity. As human beings, we want to be fair. When someone does something good for you, you also want to do something good for them in return. And so I think this was probably a pretty woman, and he is an old guy. So she approached him and started talking to him. So I think he appreciated that. Later, she invited him to her home where she cooked for him. She took care of him for 6 days. She listened to his plans for starting a boiled meat business and helped him actually come up with a business plan and went out to look for the things that will help it get off the ground. So after all the kindness that she showed him, he felt obliged to be kind to her in return. Fraudsters are going to try and do things for you. They're going to offer you small kindnesses that you are going to appreciate. And then because of this reciprocity that you have in you, you are going to be likely to trust them and to do something for them in future in terms of giving them money. So a fraudster is going to come to you and tell you that all they want to do is help you become rich, and you are going to believe that, and in the end you're going to lose your money. So how can you protect yourself? One of the biggest mistakes that this man made was that there are no records to show any of these transactions that he is claiming. There is no evidence to show that he had actually given this woman any money. In fact, if he was to go to court, and if we live in a just and fair country, because there is no evidence that this woman took any money from him, then she will be set free. Therefore, whenever you are interacting with anyone, make sure there is a paper trail. Make sure that there is evidence to show that you are giving them money. Whether it is through WhatsApp messages, whether it is through actually getting them to sign a document or getting photocopies of their IDs, there needs to be evidence that you can take to court and that you can prove that they actually took money from you. Years ago, I made a similar mistake. My mom was in the United States and she sent me a huge amount of money when I was in college and asked me to give it to my cousin. I withdrew that money, then handed it over to my cousin. Later, when my mom asked my cousin whether she had received that money, she absolutely denied it. To this day, I have absolutely no proof that I gave them that money. Therefore, whenever you are dealing with money, it doesn't matter whether you have known this person for years, whether they are your friend or your relative, you need to have evidence. Make sure there is a paper trail, whether it's on WhatsApp. Make sure they sign documents. Make sure that you make copies of their IDs. That way, when you go to court, you're going to have some evidence to show the amount of money that you have lost. There are a number of ways that fraudsters are going to try and take your money from you, but one of the most common one is the affinity fraud. And in this one, they're going to befriend you. They're going to approach you in social situations. Therefore, be very vigilant whenever you are in these types of situations. And in addition to this, they're going to use the foot in the door approach, where they ask you for a small amount of money that you're comfortable with before asking you for greater amounts later. So whenever you're giving money to someone, always ask yourself, why are you doing that? In addition to that, keep records. It doesn't matter how long you have known that person, whether you've known them since childhood, whether they are your friend. Always make sure that there is a paper trail that you can use as evidence in court. Make it hard for scammers to get to your money. I've written a book that goes in depth into this subject. I cover more ways that scammers use to get your money, the different ways that they use to manipulate you into giving them money. And in addition to that, there are many more ways that you can use to protect yourself. It is available on Amazon Kindle for just $2.99. The link is in the description.